All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We want to welcome everyone today. I know we're a couple of minutes past the hour, but we want to welcome everyone for joining us for our second Back to School 2020 virtual town hall. Yesterday, we hosted one for our employees. Today, we're proud to bring one to our community members to keep you guys informed of everything that is going on as we prepare for back to school in the year 2020 and the 2020-21 school year. We've got a lot of information to bring to you today, a lot of great panelists that you see on your screen here. So we're excited to have them be able to share with you. And, as we go throughout this today, we've received a lot of questions, in advance of this particular meeting. And so we're going to try to get to a lot of those questions, as many as we can, at the conclusion of some of the information that will be shared by our panelists. But what I want to do first is introduce you to our panelists and the folks that will be speaking with you today. And a lot of the folks who've been doing some very heavy lifting behind the scenes to make sure that the 2020-21 school year is going to be as successful as possible. So, let's get started. First off, with our panelists, you have your HCS Executive Cabinet team, and we have one that wasn't able to be with us today, but we have a great fill-in. But first, we're going to start from left to right. Dr. April Madden, our Chief Officer of Family and Student Support Services. We have Christy Willis, our Chief Officer of Finance. And in place of Ms. Valerie Sue Smith, our Chief Officer of Human Resources, we have Ms. Anissa Johnson, who is an Executive Director in Human Resources. We have Dr. Brian Blanton, Chief Officer for Information in the district. We have Mr. Kirk Schrum, our Chief School Leadership Officer. Ms. Melissa Morse, our Chief Officer for Learning and Performance. Josh Malcolm, our Chief Officer of Operations. And then we have our Chief of Staff, Dr. Carl Knowlton. Those will be the panelists you'll be hearing from today. Now let's also talk to let's see who's been on these teams that have been driving a lot of the work to prepare the school district to get back to the new school year. And so we're going to start again from left to right. We have Erica Harrison Arnold, our Executive Director of Legal Compliance. We have Dr. Greg Benton, Assistant Superintendent for Policy Planning and System Improvement. We have Shanika Clay, our Director of Finance, Efficiency, and Effectiveness. Of course, we've already introduced Dr. Knowlton, but we have Jadon McCarthy, who is our Director of Accountability and Instructional Administration. We have Allison Norsworthy, our Facilitator of Research and Grants. And then we have Caitlin Sims, our Senior Director of School Support. So these folks have been doing a lot of, again, the heavy lifting behind the scenes, coordinating a lot of teams to really get our district, where it needs to be and get everything ready for the new school year. Now, I'd also like to introduce you to some important members that let me get back to them as it just went past them. We have our several members of our Board of Education on the call today. And so first up, we'd like to welcome Mrs. Annette Edwards. She's our board member from District 5. We also have Sophie Pope, our board member from District 4. And we have our board vice chair with us today, Mrs. Holly Cobb, from representing District 3. I would like to remind people that we could experience some technical difficulties. There's a rather large rain cell that came through not too long ago. And in yesterday's meeting, we also had some internet connectivity issues that did cause the service to drop out. And so just bear with us. We're going to get through this, and we're going to try to get you as much information as we possibly can. So what I also want to remind folks is if there's some questions that you have that you haven't been able to get answers to yet, or after the conclusion of today's meeting, you still need answers to, we have a web or an email address called backto-school-questions@henry.k12.ga.us that you can send those to. So without delaying any further, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker today, and that would be our superintendent, Dr. Mary Elizabeth Davis.
Well, thank you, JD, and good afternoon. Thank you to everybody who has been tuned in and available to join us today. And actually, as I begin, I want to set the purpose for our conversation together today. Earlier this month, Henry County Schools shared the plan for reopening schools on August 3rd. And we shared two scenarios, and the first of those scenarios has two options. Now, today, we aim to start getting a little bit more detailed in the information that we can distribute so that you can start to think about the choices you would like to make as a family as we head into the new school year. We're aiming to be really clear about what we know. We're also hopeful that we can share with you what we don't know yet, but then we want to make sure you feel comfortable on how you can stay informed as information is evolving. Now, this is a challenge. I'll be honest, it's a challenge to come before our families and our students today with 6 weeks until our school year starts, and yet know that we just don't know everything we all wish we had answers to quite yet. But it is our commitment to try to continue to bring to you what we do know and let you see how that information evolves as these 6 weeks progress and we head into August. So I'm excited that we are on the right journey to responsibly open school and get started in August. Now, keep in mind, as a school system here in the state of Georgia, everything we share with you today has to be in alignment with the Georgia Department of Education Reopening Schools guidelines. And we are working daily hand in hand with our Henry County Department of Public Health, specifically the District 4 faculty and staff and professionals at that Department of Health agency. So I'm going to start with an overview. You're going to hear from lots of people that you see on the screen. I know we've received several questions in advance, and JD is going to moderate that for us, but we know an hour will go so fast, and we don't want you to be left with questions unanswered. So I do encourage you to use that back to school questions at henry.k12.ga.us email address to keep your concerns, your questions, and your communication with us. Okay, here's the overview. We have talked about 2 different scenarios. Let me start with scenario number 1. Scenario number 1 leaves families with 2 options. This is really where we're going to spend most of our time. Scenario 1 with 2 options. Option 1 is that families can actually enroll in and register for the continuation of remote learning. That registration period is going to open on July 8th and run through July 17th. And that's the moment in time when families can really make a choice about whether I want to start my year and my students' year in a remote learning classroom. Now, I will say the difference that families will experience than that of the spring will be a better articulation of attendance and participation and even grading associated guidelines. And so all of that will be a part of a parent agreement when registering in remote learning. But that will be an option for families who are most successful in that environment or see that as the best solution for the family right now. And our Chief Technology Officer is going to spend a little more time talking about our K2 access if a K2 family is interested in that remote learning classroom. Now, the second option is for families who are ready for their children to return to a school campus. And I know in order for you to make that decision, you really want to hear what are the layers of preventative efforts that are going to be put in place in each element of a child's school day. And well, that's what this team on the screen is spending their waking hours working toward. And we're going to be able to share today what we know. We're going to share, quite honestly, what we don't know quite yet, but commit to knowing by July 8th to help in that decision. And then we're also going to be able to keep you informed via our website as a great spot for information. Now, I will say our return to school campus is going to start to introduce you to some new language, just like we are all becoming accustomed to new language. We're going to talk a lot about MySpace and responsible spacing of students and faculty and staff. We're going to talk about a masked, strongly encouraged environment. And we're going to talk about how we're adapting the physical plant. You'll start to hear some of that today, and then you'll get a glimpse of how that will get more detailed and evolve in the coming weeks. Now, I think scenario 1 will consume a lot of our attention and time today, and probably your thinking. But I do want to just briefly mention that scenario 2 is in place and part of our preparation should we be directed to close school buildings at the start of the school year. In Henry County, we will start on August 3rd in remote learning if we are required to close school buildings, and that remote learning will be for all students. I just think it's good for people to know that if we are directed to close schools and close school campuses, what will Henry County schools be doing? And that will be to stand up remote learning for everybody. Now, before I share the screen with my colleagues that you see before you, I actually want to take a moment and share our current district website. And what I would love to draw your attention to on this district website, hoping that you can see this screen, is that there is a section here called Back to School Information. I'd encourage you to click on that. You're going to see that not everything is fully developed, because this is where information will be getting populated over the next couple of weeks. Now, first of all, on the overview, you can get a snapshot of those scenarios that I just articulated and watch a video that continues to articulate how those options for families can work. But I also want to bring your attention to the timeline. This is where you can stay up to date. Here's June 25th. Here's our first virtual town hall. We're glad you're a part of that. But I also want to mention here on July 8th is where additional enhanced safety protocols will become available right here on this website. On July 8th, this is when we will begin to open the remote learning registration period for any family interested in opting into remote learning to start the year. July 17th is when that period will close, and then you will continue to see more dates populate as we can clarify information distribution over the next couple of weeks. Now, that Georgia Department of Education guidance that I mentioned before, if you'd like to click in here and learn about how the state of Georgia is structuring its framework for all school systems to plan underneath, this is a great resource. This is what we are really looking at each and every day. And now let me take you to the Return to School Playbook. This is where you will start finding how it is we are going to be adapting our schools. Now, you're going to see this blank today, but by July 8th, this is going to be completely populated so that you have a sense of how is that school facility going to be addressed. You're going to hear us talk about it today, but acknowledge some of the details that we're still working out. And then the same will be true for classrooms, our large spaces like cafeterias and playground and gymnasiums, as well as our media centers and our JROTC facilities, our CTAE facilities, our fine art facilities. How will transportation adapt, and how are we preparing to address mental and physical wellness? Now, also, last thing I'll draw your attention to is this frequently asked questions. And what you can actually see is we've already begun to populate the most frequently asked questions that we have received. Many of them have come right from you via our town hall and our back to school questions email addresses. So I want to draw your attention to the many common questions that we have been hearing from you, and this is a great place to get yourself even more familiar with our preparation. Okay, now I know you want us to just get into the details, so I'm actually going to ask my colleague, our Chief Operations Officer, to start talking a little bit about that adaptation of the physical plan. And so, Mr. Malcolm, Josh, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everybody today. Before diving into some of the current measures we are looking into, I wanted to briefly revisit what happened when schools were closed March 13th. On March 16th, we began a 2-week disinfection process that encompassed all Henry County schools facilities. In addition, all buses received this disinfection. From there, due to the fact that facilities were subsequently shut down for the remainder of the school year, some normal summer cleaning activities were able to start sooner than in years past. We are currently continuing this process to ensure that all schools will receive their full summer cleaning. As we look forward to the new school year, full cleaning services will continue, along with other measures that will be taken to allow for additional disinfection of facilities every day. This will include disinfection of high touch point areas. A few examples of these include tables, doorknobs, light switches, and countertops. Additional disinfection and cleaning will also be provided in highly used areas. We are also working on final plans should an area have exposure to COVID-19. These plans will include isolation of the area and deep disinfection of said area. Additional equipment such as electrostatic sprayers, backpack sprayers, and Clorox 360 machines will be utilized, along with normal disinfection measures. So while we continue to develop our final planning for custodial services. We're also working on additional possible initiatives from operations. They currently include, but are not limited to, the use of EPA-rated viricides for cleaning, the addition of hand sanitizer dispensers for all facilities. These dispensers will be located at any intersection of 3 or more hallways, elementary school bus ramps, and all office lobbies. Increased air filtration for all facilities. Changing of filters and coil cleaning will be increased from current frequency. Modified loading and unloading of school buses. The possibility of responsible distancing on school buses. Increased sanitization of high touch point areas on school buses. Signage concerning best hygiene practices and protective measure recommendations, and building entry protocols. Finally, please know that while we work through these identified initiatives, we will also continue to explore guidance that we receive from local, state, and federal authorities, including the Georgia Department of Education, Governor's Office, CDC, and local boards of health. Dr. Davis, that concludes what I had prepared, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Josh. I know we're going to have a lot of questions for you. I want to make sure we hear from all of our panelists, and then we'll bring you a few more questions about that adaptation of the classroom and the school facility. All right, so I would think it would be a great opportunity now to talk a little bit about the technology and the infrastructure to support devices. So if I could turn this over to our Chief Information Officer, Brian Blanton. Dr. Blanton, why don't you give us a quick update?
Sure, Mary Elizabeth. So most of our students in grades 3 through 12 will return in the fall with devices in hand. And we shipped a little over 400 devices and 500 chargers back during the spring. So we should be in pretty good shape with devices at these levels as we return. Of course, we recognize that some students may have technical issues arise during the summer. And of course, we'll address any needed repairs for students and staff as they return. But in grades K or pre-K through 2, our students have not been assigned devices that go home with them. So we found this past spring that presented some learning challenges for our learners and had an impact on learning opportunities in some cases. So to address this, we'll be working with the families of our pre-K through 2nd grade students to provide a device for those students who are both opting for remote learning and who don't currently have an device at home. In terms of devices for our rising 3rd graders, we'll be delivering Chromebooks to schools in July for those learners. So these should be ready for distribution as the school year begins. And finally, we recognize that not every student has at-home internet access. And while we worked to help with this in the spring, we found that the hotspot devices we had on hand, which was not quite 300, these didn't support many who still needed assistance. So we appreciate the assistance and partnership with our Family and Student Services Division and Deborah Delane's leadership to help work with Sprint to secure an additional 650 hotspot devices. And we'll be working, continue that work with our partners in Family and Student Services to identify students who need these. So that's what I have, Mary Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And I think it was a great segue to talk to our Chief Family and Student Support Services Officer. And so Dr. Madden, talk a little bit about really considering the whole child and taking care of our kids. And you're just muted, so go ahead and unmute real quickly. There you go.
Did I unmute then?
You did it, yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. As we know that our world grapples with the consequences of our pandemic and our societal demands with inclusion and equality, teaching and practicing social and emotional skills is more important than ever right now. And the Henry County Schools Family and Student Services, with partnerships with other divisions, will be prepared to offer a reconnect plan with a comprehensive set of services that addresses the needs of children and their families, which includes expanding and investing in our SEL curriculum, as well as systems and practices to provide our students with a wide array of supports that will help them succeed in school. Also, we'll partner with community agencies in allocating resources to provide an integrated focus on academics, health, and social services, and expanding the reach of our social and emotional learning curriculum throughout the district K-12 and prioritizing the social and emotional development for our children and adults. as well as expanding our existing school-based mental health partnerships to meet the increasing needs of our students and increasing accessibility of those services. I would like to also now shift the conversation to our ESE. Students with disabilities will be provided supports and services regardless of the instructional setting or scenario which is chosen. If families elect for their children to return to campus, our students' IEPs will be implemented and IEP teams will address any identified learning gaps due to remote learning. If families would like to explore the option to continue with remote learning, the student's IEP team will convene to determine the appropriate instructional model for the student. In the event that our district has to go back to remote learning, where in our environments, the district will implement a district-wide remote learning plan and students will receive IEP supports and services that can also be implemented remotely. Dr. Davis, that concludes what I have to offer today.
Great. I'm sure we're going to have a few follow-up questions for you, Dr. Madden, but thank you for also providing the segue to talk about teaching and learning. And I'd love to call upon our Chief Learning and Performance Officer, Missy Morris, if you could share just a little bit about the learning experience.
I'd love to. And I'm actually really proud to say that while many districts across America had great difficulty switching to remote learning when COVID called for us to, most of our students in Henry County were able to continue learning in that final term of the school year. And so because of this, we don't anticipate as much learning loss as you may be hearing about on TV or reading online. And we recognize that while we are in a better position than other districts are around the country, we recognize we will have some students who have gaps. And so we're prepared to help students repair learning and recover learning from that term 4 if they weren't able to be as successful as we would have hoped that they could be. So I just want to share a couple of things that we're going to do to support students to be able to recover that learning. So one of the things that we're going to do in appropriate grades and courses is have a 2-week kickstart as we start back on August 3rd to be able to address the essential standards and skills that we did in term 4 to make sure that our kids really got it. And really what we will do is provide very short tests that we can give students to pinpoint what their needs might be, so that if we have students who need additional help, we can provide that support. But as well, for our students who did really well during term 4, we can enrich their learning and give them a deeper experience. So spending a little bit of time at the start of the school year to be able to make sure that we do what we need to do to meet students where they are and close those gaps for their learning. Teachers are going to also be very sure that during the school year, they are reviewing those skills and standards from that term 4 time when they're foundational for what learning needs to take place in the new school year. So let me just give you a little bit of an example of what that might be. So in the 4th grade, in term 4, you learn measurement. That's one of the skills that our 4th graders learned while they were at home during remote learning. So as 5th graders, when they get to unit 6, which is using measurement for volume, the teacher is going to be very explicit about going back over those standards from 4th grade to really make sure before they get into the 5th grade standards that they understood what they learned in the 4th grade. So teachers are going to be really certain that they're making sure to build on that foundation for your students. So as Mary Elizabeth also mentioned, we are diligently right now working on a remote learning plan. We know that as families, if you want to opt into that remote learning plan, you want to know what that's going to look and feel like for students. And when you make that choice, I want you to know that we're in the process of developing the framework of exactly what it will look and feel like for students who make that choice. One thing I can tell you for sure, as Dr. Davis mentioned as well, we are going to make sure that now, unlike before, when we only had 2 days to go from being in person to remote, we've learned a lot since then. So we know that things like attendance and participation and deep engagement in the learning, as well as the way students are graded, we can prepare for those now, and we can ensure that families know what those expectations are and know that students are going, just like we do in our face-to-face classrooms, be held accountable to high levels of learning with their teachers. We're also going to make sure that our teachers are supported with strong professional learning so that they can provide students in the Henry County community with the best possible remote learning experience for the families who opt in. So while we don't have all of the details to share with you today, on July 8th, when you start making decisions as families, if you want to opt in, we'll have additional information for you so that you can really make that informed decision for the best choice for you, your students, and your family.
Thank you so much, Missy. And core business being student learning is something our board remain committed to. And so thank you for thinking about how we ensure that learning really doesn't stop and gaps are filled. I'd love to ask Anissa Johnson now to just talk a little bit about the employment practices, the staffing practices, and just kind of set the stage for what families can anticipate about the return of our workforce. Go ahead, Anissa.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Hello, everyone. On June 18th, the district launched a return to work survey to our employees. We are at well over 63% responding at this time, with approximately 85% planning to return to the work site. The challenge now is to triangulate the employee information with student needs. We will work with each principal to conduct a school-by-school analysis of the information and data that we have to map out a plan to open schools on August 3rd, 2020. While the needs of our students and families will ultimately dictate our staffing requirements for in-person and remote teaching and learning, we care about our employees and will accommodate each employee's circumstances to the extent feasible. The district's playbook for human resource matters involving return to work procedures includes following the leave provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, issued by the U.S. Department of Labor. And we are monitoring closely the Georgia Department of Education's Reopening Schools framework. Our employees' health, safety, and wellness, along with that of our students, is our top priority. As Dr. Davis stated, we can't guarantee a COVID-free environment. However, we can guarantee precautions and protocols are in place and followed that best protect all of us. We are currently working through many return to work considerations, all in conjunction with guidance from the CDC and our District 4 public health authorities. The district is here to support our employees in any way that we can as we all together navigate these unusual but surmountable circumstances. That's it, Dr. Davis. Thank you,
Anissa. Thank you so much. And we certainly know our team of employees miss our students so much. And we see a lot of eagerness to restore those relationships as quickly as possible. Thank you. I'd love to just take a moment because you can't really read a newspaper or watch the news without thinking about the economic conditions that this season has created. And of course, that has to go ahead and translate into school systems. So I'd like our Chief Financial Officer, Christy Willis, to just talk a little bit about, paint a picture of our financial stability here in the organization.
I'd love to. Thanks, Mary Elizabeth. I appreciate the time. Yeah, we're navigating some economic impacts of COVID-19. This health pandemic, there's no doubt that we're going to face some budget challenges. So I want to talk a little bit about our general fund, which is the home to our daily operations within the school system. And it's historically been funded with approximately 60% of state funds and 40% of local funds. Now, Georgia legislators reconvened on June 15th, and they're hard at work at getting a budget ready for us. And we've got a watchful eye on what's transpiring there, because that state budget does affect our funding for the school system, as well as other school systems in the state. So what we're doing is we're creating budgets around what we think by that worst case scenario, and then that best case scenario, and a few in between too, with regards to state funding. Now, recently, prior to the health pandemic, our local economy has been thriving, and it's actually growing faster than many economies, other county economies throughout the state of Georgia. And as I mentioned, that 40% of local fund dollars, that's made up largely of property taxes from you, our community. And so depending on the severity of the state cuts, we could actually see a shift of the local dollars playing an even larger and more important role in our budget than that historical 40% that I mentioned. So here's what we know. We can readily use $10.5 million of our reserves for next year's budget. School systems have been awarded federal funding to assist and fill gaps during this health pandemic. And we're evaluating other spending practices that we have, maybe to suspend, streamline, or combine for reduction strategies. So the good news is that past budget work has allowed our board to be in good financial shape as we enter these uncertain economic times. Our board is committed to stabilizing the positions that we currently have and continue to ensure, like Mary Elizabeth mentioned, that core business is student learning. So we hope if we get our state budget figures by June 30th, we're going to present a tentative budget at the July 13th board meeting and a final budget at the called meeting on July 27th. Now, that budget's going to continue to support core business of student learning. And prior to passing that budget, we're going to hold 2 public hearings. One is scheduled for Monday, the 13th at 6:30 p.m. And the second is scheduled for Monday, July 27th at 4 p.m. Mary Elizabeth, that's what I have today, if I can be available for any questions as well.
We are going to get to some questions as we wrap up our panelists today. And so thank you for that. Now, you know what is interesting is Henry County Schools has the honor to support 50 schools and 43,000 young people and their families. But this is a great moment to have a conversation about how the framework for readiness to start the next school year is really being designed, researched, and lots of peer district review in order to find best solutions for this time in this moment. But I know that as a parent myself, what I really care about is my local school. And really, I'm sure you're thinking, how is my child's school ready to adapt and ready to assist the learning to continue? Because the relationship families have with their specific school is the most important relationship that anyone has. And so I'd love if Kirk Schrum, our Chief School Leadership Officer, if you talk just a little bit about how schools are getting ready and the role that our school principals are playing as we prepare for August 3rd.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Of course, for most of us in the community, when you think about your school, as Mary Elizabeth said, you think about the teachers, you think about the administrators, you think about the principals, you think about the connections you've made with the people. And our administrators, just as our teachers, are just as eager to get back to learning with students and miss them greatly. And so they've been working all summer along with us here in the district staff and team to be ready for that return. And part of what we're doing right now is we know that as questions emerge from the community, often the person you go to is that individual you trust, and that's the school principal that you have the relationship with. And so we're working really hard to make sure that we increase our communication with our leaders, that we have increased opportunity for our school principals and assistant principals to engage in dialogue with us at the district office, that we're working in partnership. So as our back to school committee begins to build the framework, and as you saw the FAQs on the website that Dr. Davis alluded to, then working with our administrators on what does that mean for the school? How are you as a school leader going to communicate this to your community? And how as a cluster do we continue to work together for you as the community so that we're there to support and be ready? So that's a lot of the work that we're engaged in at the district level, just ensuring that our leaders have all the answers and the support that they need to be able to welcome students back here in just a few weeks. And actually, many people may not realize this, but we have had students on our campus now for a couple of weeks. Following Georgia High School Association guidelines, we've had some of our athletes and others return for conditioning. And so that has been going well for, I think we're now in week 2 or 3 of that, and looking forward to continuing that as we go through the summer. So Dr. Davis, that concludes what I have prepared.
Thank you, Kirk. And there's certainly a level of complexity to this to make our conversation succinct and leave some time for questions. Of course, is a challenge. We hope this is not the last of our dialogues together. But if I could, JD, I know you've been receiving some questions in advance, and maybe I could turn it over to you and you could ask some of those most commonly ones that are coming in, knowing that, of course, I understand we have about 2,000 viewers at this point, and so we won't be able to get to all the questions that have emerged, but we'll encourage re-engaging in our website to find out how those answers evolve. So JD, what have you seen as commonly asked questions?
Well, thank you, Mary Elizabeth. You are exactly right. We have received a lot of interest, rightfully so, in how we're going to get things kicked off for this new school year. And there have been a lot of operational type of questions. And so that segues nicely over to our Chief Officer of Operations. One of those questions that we have continued to receive centers around transportation. We also put out our preliminary preference survey, a question about how you'd be delivering your child, or how your child would be arriving to school this year. And, we've got some that will be sending their kids on the bus. And so, Mr. Malcolm, if you could share with our viewers some information about how we're really going to enact safety measures on the bus this year to keep both our riders and our drivers safe as they transport to and from school.
So sure, I mentioned a little bit of that in my opening. So a lot of it's going to depend on our ridership, and we're still gathering that data as we speak. And from that, we're looking into modified how we load and unload students, possibly responsible distancing on those school buses. And then, of course, every day we're going to do sanitization of the high touch point areas on the school buses. So that will include wipe down of those areas every single day. So just a couple of things we're looking into right now. There are others that we're researching, and but we know that we're probably going with those measures at this point at a minimum. And as we continue to get some of the information back from our community, we will look into other things as well.
Perfect. Thank you so very much for sharing that. I know that, of course, as is the case with all of this information, as we continue to receive information from our trusted partners with the health department, state government officials, local officials, that some of these things could change and evolve, and we're going to keep you as up to date as possible with all this information. So there's another very popular question that has come through quite frequently, and this one centers around the option for either going back into the classroom or choosing remote learning, but it centers on, what if I want to change my mind mid-year? So Ms. Morse, if you could speak to that particular question and what options families have for if they start off remote learning and, hey, I want to go back into the classroom, or vice versa.
Sure, thanks, JD. So because right now we're still working on the details of that framework, we are aware that parents are going to want to potentially reconsider once their child makes the choice to go remote or the opposite. We are looking at what the right entry and exit points will be for students at different grade levels. So that's one of those details that is still in development, but will be available for you when you're going to make your choice during that week starting on the 8th of July. So we don't quite have that one answered yet, but we know it's a consideration, and it's one of the things we're solving for.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. And like she just said, folks, there's a lot of things that are still being worked through. And as we get closer to that decision date, what we have put out there is July 8th. The survey that you've already taken is primarily just to kind of get a gauge of where people's thoughts are right now, so we can better prepare. And as we get closer to the 8th, when you have to make that decision for your family, we hope that you'll have all the information at hand at that time, so you can make the best decision for your family. I'd like to go to Dr. Madden for a second. There's questions that center around our exceptional student education program, otherwise which serves our special needs population. And Dr. Madden, there are a lot of questions about what a reintroduction into the classroom environment would look like for a lot of our students with different and varying needs, as well as those same students being at home. And I think you spoke to it a little bit, but could you reiterate or share, an update about how that would look and how we're going to accommodate our students with special needs?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think about with this is that we're working out a framework so that we can provide supports and services for our students, as I mentioned, regardless of the instructional setting. So once again, if our families elect for their children to return to campus, we will make sure that their IEPs will be implemented to its fullest, and the IEP teams will address any identified learning gaps due to remote learning. The IEP is always a driving force, and we can always reconvene with teams to make sure that we're providing the best case scenario to meet the individual needs of our students. If the families would like to explore the option to continue with remote learning, then the student's IEP team will convene to determine the appropriate instructional model for that student. But regardless, all students will continue to receive services. Our district is in close communication with the Georgia Department of Education, making sure that we are consulting with them and within the guidelines of what our Department of Education is recommending.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. A very important piece to our school system are those students, that have those needs that we need to be able to provide those support services for. So thank you for being able to speak to that particular question. I would like to move now to a question that has been posed to Dr. Blanton and the technology and information side of things. Of course, when we jumped into remote learning last year, again, we had devices for our 3rd through 12th grade students, and of course, devices are great, but also the connectivity at home is something that we're trying to address. And I know you spoke to it a little bit, but I know your team also is aware of potentially some partners out there to maybe provide some internet services out there. What are some things that parents can look for to help if they choose that remote learning option to make sure that their remote learning experience goes as smooth as possible?
Well, if it comes to internet access, then we are trying to assist in ways that we can. We have a limited number of hotspot devices, and then we also work with families related to discounted offers that Charter and AT&T provide through everyone.org and everyoneon.org, I'm sorry. And so, we're working very intentionally to be able to help folks. Our Family and Student Services Division has done a great job of securing additional Wi-Fi hotspots. So we'll work with families through that division and our partners there to try to help families out as best we can. Additionally, we also have the Georgia Department of Education's Technology Services Division that has worked with both Sprint and AT&T and Verizon to provide districts with some discounted pricing. So if it goes beyond that, we may have to look to other opportunities, but we're going to work hard to help families who choose remote learning to be able to provide access at home. And for the K-2 students, we did have some students who did not have devices at home. So for those students who in pre-K grades through 2nd grade who do not have a device at home and are not able to participate in digital learning, but their families choosing remote learning, we're going to work with them to provide a device also.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Blanton. Excuse me. And we know that, there's, right now that there's a good many of our viewers and folks throughout the district who aren't able to watch today, but maybe watching later, who are highly, considering that option to go to remote learning, even, when some people may be choosing to go back to the classroom. So being able to have all that available is key to continuing the learning and partnering cross-divisionally with all of the support in our district to make the learning experience, whichever is one is chosen by our families, exceptional. So I'd like to move to Ms. Willis right now. There's a question that we've received with some regularity and consistency from our viewers and from folks out in the community, and it speaks to probably something a lot of people are familiar with, and that was the last economic recession that we had, which led to, unfortunately, some furlough days, which did impact some of our instructional days in the district. Based on the information that you know now, and the information coming from the state government as they work through their budget process, do you anticipate, this is, one of the questions, any elimination of instructional days based off of, any funding cuts?
Funding cuts are going to be steep. We're hearing 11%. And for our school system, that equates to, with the other cuts that we were looking at, anywhere over $40 to $45 million. Right now, with the other things that we can do, we are not, that would be our last choice that we would want to make, is any furloughs affecting instructional.
Fantastic. Of course, we know the reality of and that experience for those who have been around here, but Henry County and the Board of Education do a phenomenal job of really working to make our budget as sound, fiscally sound, as responsible to the taxpayers, funding that we receive, to make sure that our students have the best they possibly can, to make sure that their learning experience in Henry County, of course, is exceptional. So thank you for that update. Mr. Schramm would like to pose a couple of questions that we've received, toward you, and those, folks, let's be honest, we're around the corner from football right now. And so athletics has been on a lot of people's mind. I know that there's probably some updates. And again, you spoke to them a little bit, but there's probably some timelines that are in place to talk about athletics. What are some of the things that GHSA has worked with school districts to help navigate the reintroduction of sports into our school settings?
Sure. Yes, I know that is a hot topic, not only in our school system, but nationwide, in pro sports and college and everything else. And we're grateful to have a good partner with our Georgia High School Association, keeping us informed. We have many of our school, or several of our leaders that are part of that leadership group, and they have been doing a great job keeping us informed of what we can do, when we can do it, and what the requirements and the conditions are. And then as we receive that information, we turn it around, we meet with our athletic directors from every school, who in turn share that information with the coaches to make sure it gets communicated out to our families. So in our current state that we're in, having our groups that are back for conditioning, also being able to run some drills. But we do know the Georgia High School Association is meeting continually. And as they share new information to our districts, we certainly take that information, review it, determine what's in the best interest of our student athletes here in Henry County, and then work with our school leaders and our coaches to share that information. And JD, I just wanted to mention something also too, that you had posed a question to April about students returning, and wanted to highlight something that's been occurring and over the course of the summer. And as we transition, notice that some of the other things our principals are working on to make sure that we're connecting with the community and that our students are welcome and excited to come back. Many of our schools did virtual orientations and virtual events to welcome, especially students in transition grades from 5th to 6th and 8th to 9th and others into their buildings. So we're looking to continue and expand some of those practices so that when our students do come back, they know what the building looks like and have some level of familiarity and comfort with the administrative team and the teachers. So wanted to mention that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you and I wanted to, real quick also, because I know this is a topic for our younger grades as well. Some of the recommendations that we've seen placed out before indicate, things like recess may be impacted for our younger grades. What's kind of the thought process right now, for those types of activities?
Well, certainly, as we've heard from our speakers on the screen, we're thinking about how do we have responsible distancing or other practices to ensure safety, and how those evolve not only in the classroom, but how those evolve to larger spaces, and what those look like are still in development. So when it comes to things like number of students on a playground or cafeteria or gym, those are still things we're working through to make sure that we're following the best practices and guidelines from Georgia Department of Education and other entities. And those are parts of the information that we'll continue to build and share out with our public as they get defined after that July date.
Perfect. So I'd like to toss the next couple of questions over to Superintendent Davis. Mary Elizabeth, I know that we've had a lot of people that have chimed in and sent questions of concern about the things they're seeing, the reports they're seeing on the news right now about the rising number of cases, all across the nation, including Georgia, and that does pose concern for many families. Where are we right now in terms of, I guess, our partnership with folks and helping make the best decision to, safely go back to school if that's what somebody chooses to do?
Yeah, thank you for that, JD. Isn't that's on the top of everyone's mind right now, and really wanting to be conscious of the environment in which we're developing plans. Now, I will say I actually am a member of the Board of Health for District 4, and as a board member for the District 4 Public Health Agency, I'm actually getting regular and very direct communication from our director of that public health agency, which is coming directly from the Georgia Director of Public Health. So I think that that's valuable. I mean, I can't stress that partnership couldn't be more essential. And I also believe that Henry County Schools is building agile plans. The part that is a strain for all of us in our personal lives, our community lives, our professional lives, and surely our school life is that there just hasn't been a clear crystal ball clarity on every moment that's on the horizon. But what I do have confidence in here in Henry County Schools is our true desire to be communicating to our families, our students, and our employees as regularly, as consistently, and as accurately as possible, always being clear about what we know and being very honest about what we just don't know yet and how we're working towards a solution. And then the second part is that agile planning means that we're really building capacity to do a lot of different models depending on what the conditions call for us to do. And we are not the authority on all of that, but we are going to be prepared to be responsive. So it is of deep concern, the health and of our community and of our youth. And I think that we're just also moving into a school year where there is no environment that has been guaranteed to be COVID-free. But we have learned a lot since March on how we layer in preventative and insulating measures that ultimately aim to control the spread, stop the spread, and reduce exposure to the virus. And that's really where we are. And we are right there alongside you as parents and community members with deep concern about the health of our youth and how the health of our youth impacts the health of our families. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, so we're getting very close to the end of our hour, and we've had a lot of great questions, and we continue to receive those questions. I know that there's an opportunity to keep our community as informed as possible, and I know that Dr. Knowlton, our Chief of Staff, would like to share some of those ways and how we keep our community as up to date as possible.
Exactly. Thank you so much, JD. Good afternoon. As you can see, we will continue to use the website as our go-to communication tool for parents, for our employees, and also for our other community stakeholders, as well as continue the process of communicating through social media and Infinite Campus. We found these means of communication to be highly effective during our time of sharing with our community during COVID-19. Also, it was user-friendly. And recently, as we mentioned earlier, we recently created and shared the website, Back to School question website. And we noticed that a lot of members have already found it. We want you to continue to use that website as you communicate with us. To date, we've received over 200 inquiries from this particular email site. So what we're doing with this is it's driving, as we're reviewing these questions, actually serving as a way to inform our efforts and driving our efforts to back to school efforts. So we appreciate that. Also, we know that we're committed to continue to communicate, keep you updated as this process goes. As we travel these unprecedented times, we will continue to keep you updated on that. That concludes what I've prepared.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Knowlton. And, folks, again, we've got just a couple of minutes, left. And Superintendent Davis, any, closing thoughts? I know that we've seen, we released our plan back on June 12th with the support of our outstanding Board of Education to the community. And since then, we've seen other districts that have started articulating their plans a little bit. We see some mirroring plans, but we also see some different plans. We've got a great team that's working to make sure our plan is carried out with fidelity. So any closing thoughts that you have around where we are at this moment?
Yeah, thanks, JD. First of all, there are folks on the screen who are researching and actually working in collaboration with districts that are in our region and in our state. And I think that the challenge to try to find a common solution that every district will arrive to is really going to be unrealistic. There is tremendous opportunity because the students in Henry County schools have a district issued device, and that opportunity is to give families options. And by giving families options, our preliminary survey results are indicating that nearly 50% of families are interested in continuing in remote learning, and 50% of our families are interested in returning to on-campus learning. And that in and of itself is going to reduce the total student population on a school facility or in a school facility on any given day. Options are a great thing for our community, and I think that that's really going to continue our learning at high levels and taking the responsibility as publicly funded academic institution in this community being publicly accessible by our youth. The last thing that I want to say is everything you've heard today is incomplete and imperfect because we are imperfect and rather undefined times. And we want to be as closely connected in dialogue as possible while being really honest when we just don't have fully developed plans in place yet. Please stay connected to our website. Please use our Back to Schools questions email. We are getting better and getting better details, and we want to be in partnership with you. So JD, thanks for hosting this. Thank you to our 2,000 viewers who tuned in. We appreciate you, we miss you, and we cannot wait to be learning together again. JD, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Davis. Folks, that does conclude our Back to School 2020 virtual town hall. We can't thank you enough for the time that you took out of your busy schedule to sit in and hear about the many things that we're working on to make, again, this 2020-2021 school year as exceptional as possible in these very challenging times. There's no one that in this country that has the right answer to going back, but our district is really setting what we feel a strong course, a strong example for how to go about making school work in these challenging times. So thank you again for tuning in. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our steering committee. Thank you to our board members who were able to join us today. We thank you for your time as well. And as always, this broadcast will be available on our YouTube channel, and so you can watch it, share it with your friends and family, so people can stay as up to date as possible. But thank you again for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of the week. We'll see you next time. Thanks.